Hello, welcome to FilmGbe, my YouTube channel dedicated to talking about films both from the African front and the international scene. FilmGbe is a term used in my local parlance to describe an individual who is really passionate about films and likes to talk to people about them. The close likely English term would be film aficionado. My name is Papa Otu and I'll be your regular host for this YouTube channel, FilmGbe. Today I'll be talking about the direction in which the DCEU chose to distinguish themselves from the competition, that is Marvel Cinematic Universe, at the very inception of this very franchise. Currently, rumor has it that Henry Cavill is back to reprise his role as Superman in the film Black Adam, which stars Dwayne Johnson. It is also said that he is likely to also develop a sequel to Man of Steel, and also may feature in Flash, which will be released sometime next year. Now, to begin with, Man of Steel is the very first movie that kickstarted this entire franchise. And this was on the heels of the success as helmed by Christopher Nolan in the Dark Knight trilogy. Christopher Nolan, who was brought on board, was partnered by Zack Snyder and his producing partner, Deborah Snyder, to start the very first movie of this franchise, which is Man of Steel. However, it will interest you to know that initially the film that Warner Brothers and DC had in mind to kickstart this entire franchise was supposed to have been Green Lantern, which starred Ryan Reynolds. Unfortunately, due to the poor box office receipts, they scrapped it and began with Man of Steel. When you compare these two cinematic universes, you realize that of DC is dark in tone and quite grittier as compared to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which has a lot of levity infused in it. Aside the dark tone DCEU took to differentiate themselves from what Marvel have been doing with their films, there is also another element that makes it quite interesting. And that is the subject matter of gods and monsters, or the supernatural. In Man of Steel, you have a lot of these elements showcased in the film. It is said that DC have characters that are gods, in nature, trying to be men, whereas Marvel are men trying to be gods. With the direction in which Zack Snyder took, you could realize that this very subject matter of gods and monsters, or the supernatural, is littered all over in the movie. The movie begins with the world of Krypton, a world that is very different, a world that has an environment that is really harsh and in stark contrast to our blue, beautiful Earth as depicted in the movie. In this world of Krypton, the Kryptons are far advanced technologically. They have prisons that exist in the Phantom Zone. They've been able to come to a point where they even deem natural procreation of children as unnecessary, where every child is created from this Genesis chamber without necessarily having a woman giving birth to these children. And they are infused with codex. These fetuses that are given birth to are infused with this genetic coding that determines who they will become in future, even before they are born or they are harvested. A number of these elements makes me realize that the people of Krypton, with their vast knowledge and technological advancement, have sort of risen or occupied the place of where a god should be, because they are at the stage where they don't need the natural means to do what biologically should be possible. With technological advancement, they can even create human beings. I must admit that I do not know all the science behind how children are made on Krypton. It's possible that the ovaries and the seed of a man comes together to form these fetuses in the Genesis chamber. Regardless, that wasn't really discussed in the film, so I may not be able to provide much information about it. But from the very point of the world created by Zack Snyder, you realize that they were literally gods in nature. And this can even be seen from the fact that they have abandoned these ways for so long that when Joel, who together with the wife, decided to procreate through the natural means, he shared this wonderful miracle of natural birth with the Council of Krypton. But they weren't having it because they were so used and set in their ways. They were so dependent on technology. In essence, it felt like they were so comfortable with they having the ability to create life from a technological standpoint than a natural standpoint. And when Joel went ahead to share the miracle baby through natural means with Zod, Zod thought that this was so wrong. I mean, heresy, using the term heresy. And the term heresy, as we know, will be a strong philosophical standpoint as against another point which doesn't conform to the religious views or accepted norms by a group of people. So terms like heresy being thrown in there even points to the fact of the supernatural, or what I would term as religion. Just from the standpoint of Krypton, you realize that these are people who are gods in nature through what they are able to achieve in or with science or technology alone. Aside that, when you watch the film, you realize that there is a scene where Jor-El, having gone for the codec or possibly stolen the codec and infused it into baby Kal-El, who will be Clark when he comes on Earth, the wife had a major concern that by they sending Kal-El to Earth, he would be destroyed or killed by the people of Earth. By Jor-El having a greater understanding of what it would mean for his son to be on Earth, counteracted her, saying that he'll be a god to them. I mean, obviously, him being the foremost scientist in Krypton, I'm sure he had much knowledge as to the capabilities of what Kal-El will become as a result of absorbing the Earth's sun. I believe that with the infusion of the codex for 1 billion people in Kal-El, the possibility of him becoming a god to them and the vast nature of this is endless. I believe that the film has not even scratched the surface as to who Kal-El or Clark would be. Let's hope that Man of Steel 2 will be made so that we can really know the direction in which capability of Superman would go. The first set of scenes on Krypton did set the tone as to how the entire DCEU will go, with a line or dialogue by Jor-El saying that he will be a god to them, to the people on Earth. That alone, I believe, is the very starting point as to the direction Zack Snyder steered the entire DCEU towards. And that is quite interesting as compared to that of Marvel, where a lot of these superheroes are superheroes not as a result of they being gods, but rather either through science or a happy science accident. When Kal-El ends up on Earth, this same ideology of the supernatural or gods and monsters still played a role in the life of the Kent family. So you have Kal-El growing up, experiencing changes within his biology, and he has no idea or understanding as to what is happening. Whilst in high school, he saves the entirety of his class from drowning. Now, this extraordinary feat can't be achieved by an ordinary person. Even the strongest of people can't rescue an entire school bus that is completely submerged in a lake or river. But Kal-El, a young boy of perhaps 12, could do this. When he had a dialogue with the dad concerning Kal-El hiding his ability, his dad, being very fearful of how the earth will respond to his son, understood where the son stood in the scope of things concerning humanity. You have Kent interacting with a neighbor whose son saw what happened as Kal-El rescued the entire class. She was even propounding that the fact that Kal-El could do this was an act of God. So you realize that the theme of gods and monsters and supernatural was still present even in the scene of Kansas, where you have the Kent family living as they were raising their child. Now, an amazing thing also concerning the consistency of the supernatural or gods and monsters, or perhaps even religion or Christianity, you have the Kent family, who are religious or Christians, raised Kal-El in the same vein as well. So Kal-El, or Clark now, when confronted with Zod, could only go to one place, the place where he feels he can get some answers or guidance to what to do concerning this situation he's faced with. And the place he went to was the church. Without it being clearly shown, definitely this means that he was raised after the very same religion that his parents or his foster parents also fellowship in, and that is Christianity. As you continue throughout the film, there are elements that keeps dropping. When Kal-El saves the life of Lois Lane embarked on a mission to discover her savior. Through her investigations, through her search for the truth about Clark, she ended up discovering incidences that may seem isolated but are all connected to this one person, and that is Clark Kent. From Clark Kent saving his class from drowning, to him rescuing people who were going to be burnt on an oil rig, to him destroying a whole truck. She herself came to the understand that Clark Kent is definitely not from the planet Earth. This idea of the supernatural or the direction of gods and monsters was further highlighted on when Lois Lane tendered in the report to the editor-in-chief of the Daily Planet, that is Perry White. He said one thing, that he can't publish it. And the reason being that how would the world react to such a man? Even though he doesn't know Clark Kent, but he sided with Clark Kent on the matter, stressing on the fact that to have such a God man here on earth, that would be too much for people to bear. Meaning that the whole fabric of society's belief will be challenged so much so that if care is not taken, it will throw society into chaos. So you have Zack Snyder being very consistent with this gods and monsters or supernatural subject matter running through the entire film. Even the very epic fight scene that happens towards the end would baffle any individual in the world of Man of Steel. If all you have ever known was a vigilante who is Batman, even for him, being man occupied a myth in society where he is considered more than just a man. How much more Superman fight General Zod? They look like men, but defy gravity. The entire Man of Steel in itself seems to parallel some of the stories that can be found in the Bible. So you have Kal-El, who in essence is an archetype character that represents Jesus in certain sense, and also Moses, considering the journey from Krypton to Earth. But the entirety of the life of Kal-El can be likened more to Jesus. Even his name, Kal-El, Son of God, is very similar to what we know of Jesus in the Bible. Man of Steel in its entirety is more or less like a modern day Jesus Christ, but in the form of a superhero. What Zack Snyder was able to do in this film did set the tone for the entire DCEU, even though along the way it changed. Some films in the franchise didn't follow this very pattern, but the majority of them did. You have BVS, which follows in that vein. Wonder Woman, who is an offspring of Zeus, who is of the Greek mythology, still dealing with the subject matter of gods. And also you have Shazam, dealing with matters of the 7 deadly sins and wizardry. Even in Suicide Squad, you have Enchantress, who is a goddess, or what may be considered in certain religious sects as a demon. For these very first few films that began the entire DCEU, the subject matter of gods and monsters or the supernatural have been quite consistent with a lot of religious allegory, comparing it to perhaps real world experiences or real world religion. From my point of view as a viewer, I find it to be quite interesting and in a way helped truly distinguish the DCEU from what Marvel have successfully done for years. Not just a matter of levity, but in terms of their characters more driven by technology. So you have Iron Man, who wears a suit of armor. Almost all the characters in that of Marvel, apart from Thor, who is a god, from the very inception of the Marvel Cinematic Universe itself, are more of superheroes driven by technology. So this is just a little of what I deduce from watching a number of the films in the DCEU. And I think it's quite interesting. I don't know whether you share this view with me, but I would like to have you comment in the section below and let me know what you think concerning what I've discussed with you in this very first episode of FilmGbe. I hope you enjoyed what I've shared so far. There's a lot more to come, but this is just the first of many, and I'll be talking a little bit more about the other franchises in the DCEU and some of the elements that I think is very consistent with what Zack Snyder did in The Man of Steel. Let's have more discussions concerning films, both from the African front and abroad. My name is Papa Otu once again. Thanks for watching.